Froster with the knee. Oh, Sexton is out. Oh, Pennington is throwing some leather tonight. Jessica Eye with a standing arm triangle. Rousey is already going for the arm. Tate got rocked. McMahon has some power in that right hand.
You are listening to the Women Throwin Leather podcast with your host, D. Allen.
Hey guys, D. Allen here with the Women Throwin Leather podcast. So for this podcast, I just wanted to address a couple of topics. Obviously, the main topic being UFC 207, what happened and the outcome of the fight, which was a big upset. And then I also wanted to do a topic on Ronda herself. You know, what happened, what went wrong, you know, where this leaves Ronda. Then I'm going to do a topic about Amanda Nunes, you know, what this means for Amanda Nunes, what this shows in her ability. And I also wanted to talk about overall what this means for the Bantamweight division in the UFC for the women. Where do they go from here? What this means. You know, UFC 207 was kind of billed as the return of Ronda Rousey. You know, fear the return was the hashtag that Ronda used and the UFC used. And they did all these promos kind of talking about Ronda Rousey and her return, her triumphant return after her devastating loss to Holly Holm and her year layoff. So this was going to be her big return. And so they cranked out the promos and just really beefed it up about her return. And the weird thing with that is that they had all these trailers and these promos, you know, that they did and they cranked out, but then yet when it came time to actually do the media coverage, Ronda didn't do any interviews. She did no media coverage. She barely did the weigh-ins. Didn't talk to the media. She didn't do any of the press conferences. So there was essentially a media shutout. Is what Ronda did, which was really interesting. She has never done that. And I also think it's interesting that she was allowed to do that, yet when Conor McGregor wanted to do it, he got in trouble. So, to me, that shows favoritism from one fighter to the other within the UFC. But Dana explained it that, you know, that was the one thing that she asked for, and he said with all that she's done for the company, he said it was okay for her to ask that. You know, and there's speculation of why she did that, what the purpose was, you know, some of that being, you know, what's her mental state? Was she mentally preparing for the fight? Did she not want to be distracted? Was it to avoid any distraction so she could focus on, you know, her return and reclaiming her belt? So there's a lot of speculation of why she did that. But, you know, if you haven't seen UFC 207, if you don't know the outcome, then spoiler, Amanda Nunes actually TKO'd Ronda Rousey in 48 seconds in the first round, obviously. And Ronda honestly had no answer for what Amanda did. Amanda lit her up like a Christmas tree and put on a striking clinic, which was tremendously unexpected for a lot of Ronda fans. And I think for Dana White, Amanda didn't even break a sweat. I mean, she went in there and threw and through. And if you count it from the time the bell rings to when Herb Dean stopped the fight, she actually landed about 22 solid headshots on Ronda before they stopped the fight. And I don't even know if Ronda landed one on Amanda. So it was literally like a one-sided beatdown, which is surprising because that's not the Ronda that we've seen in the past. It was Ronda on the defense. And so that's her second knockout loss in a row. So let's take a look at Ronda. So what went wrong? You know, who's to blame for what went wrong in that fight last night? Personally, I think who's to blame ultimately is her coaches, is Edmund and the Glendale Fighting Club. You know, she's been with Edmund since the beginning of her MMA career, and I think he has definitely elevated her fight game from being essentially a judo fighter, Olympic judo fighter, to transitioning into MMA. So he definitely has been beneficial in her career. He worked with her on her judo and got her to the point where she was undefeated in the UFC, and she became the Bantamweight champion. And even before that, she was, you know, just ripping through fighters in Strikeforce, became the Strikeforce champion, took the belt from Misha. But I honestly think what has happened is that he's taken her as far as he can, reached the limit of his coaching abilities. But he's probably not willing to admit that, and she's probably not willing to admit that. But in my personal opinion, I think that's what really has happened. I don't know Edmund personally. I don't know Ronda personally. That's just my opinion looking at it from the the outside and looking at it from an analyst perspective, but I think that's what's happened, is that she has reached a ceiling with Edmund. And in the fight game, you either evolve and improve or you get left behind. So because of how dominant Ronda was as a champion, when she was defeated by Holly Holm, that put the whole bantamweight division on notice and said, we got a new kid in town, Holly Holm, who beat a supposedly unbeatable champion. What that did to the rest of the fighters in the division, I almost said girls, to the rest of the girls. So what that did to the rest of the fighters in the division is it showed them that they need to elevate their game. And that's what a lot of them did, is they went back to their coaches, they changed camps, they changed techniques, they improved techniques, added techniques to their skill set, and a lot of them improved. And you can see that visibly. You can see that in Sarah McMahon. You could see that in Juliana Pena. You know, you could see that in Raquel Pennington. So that's what happened while Ronda was out, is everybody accelerated, everybody improved, everybody evolved. Well, she didn't. And it was apparent last night, because what you saw last night was basically the same Ronda Rousey, who was trying to clinch, trying to get it to the ground, which makes sense because that's where her strong suit is on the ground. But the thing about Ronda Rousey, if you watch her fights, the way she gets her opponents to the ground is she clinches and tries a judo throw. And that has worked for her up to this point. But at this point in the fight game that has evolved is that everybody knows that. Everybody knows that Ronda's going to try to clinch with you and take you to the ground. So since the fighters know that, they're going to avoid the clinch. So what that does for Ronda is, if she can't clinch, then what does she do? How else can she take the fighters to the ground? She doesn't have anything else because she hasn't been trained in anything else, evidently. If she has, she's not using it. All that to say is that essentially what it seems like is Ronda was left behind. Most of the other fighters in the women's 135 have evolved past and above Ronda. So I think that's part of the problem of what happened is one, she got left behind. You know, other fighters evolved and she didn't. I think part of the other problem is that when she was on top, you know, the media, along with her coach Edmund, created this hype, along with Dana White in the UFC. So they created this monster, this hype monster. They hyped her up to be, she's going to go down as the greatest fighter of all time. She's going to retire undefeated. She's going to be, you know, the best there ever was. The media created this hype. Dana White fueled it. Her coach fueled it. The UFC fueled it. And she started to believe it. She started to believe her own hype. I really think that was the beginning of her downfall, is when she really believed that. And, you know, you'd listen to her in interviews and she would say, I'm going to retire undefeated. Well, you know, how many athletes have actually done that, retired undefeated? In combat sports, the only one that has come to mind is Layla Ali in boxing. She retired undefeated. I'm sure there's others, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, out of all the fighters that are out there, very few can actually do that. So for her to think that she could retire in MMA undefeated, I think is very naive. But I also think it's not an impractical goal. I don't think it's unachievable, but I just think it's extremely difficult. Holly Holm said it best, everybody is beatable on one day or another. And like I've said before in previous videos or podcasts, the sentiment comes to play any given Sunday. That whole philosophy is on any given Sunday, anybody can be beat. And so I think she was naive in that. So I think she believed her hype. So I think that was part of the blame too, is that, you know, she was left behind, and I think she also believed her own hype. So she believed she was invincible. So when Holly knocked her out and she was defeated, her world crashed. I mean, that was everything for her. So I think that started to play with her mindset. And so coming into this fight last night, I think that was still in the back of her mind, which is also what Miesha Tate said, is, you know, when they were asked her in the Fox Sports 1 pre-fight show, they were asking Miesha, you know, what are her thoughts on this fight? And she said, it really depends on where Ronda's mindset is. Does she have the will to fight? Does she still want to fight? It really depends on that. So which goes back and kind of cements what a lot of the fighters have said. 80% of the fight game is mental. It's a mental game. It's a battle of wills. You know, and so a lot of people were kind of going on social media and bad-mouthing Ronda and kind of saying, you know, she should retire and she should do this, and she was all hype and blah, blah, blah. And there's not a lack of internet trolls, you know, that are opinionated and quickly to criticize and turn their backs on Ronda and disrespect her and talk bad about her. But here's the thing. Let's give credit where credit is due. I've said it once and I'll say it again. None of the women would be in the UFC if it wasn't for Ronda. She's the one that opened the door. And also, she did achieve an undefeated record, you know, until Holly Holm. So she was ripping through her opponents, and she created kind of a pretty large gap between her and the rest of the bantamweight division for a while. You can't do that without talent and skill. So let's give credit and respect for what she accomplished and what she did, because she's still a great fighter. So after her loss last night, the question is, what happens now? Can she come back? Will she come back? Should she come back? So those are the questions that everybody's asking. And I think all of those questions depend on what her mentality is, what her mindset is right now. If she thinks she can come back, if she thinks that's it, it's over, I'm done. I'm going to move on. I did what I did in MMA, but it's no longer my time. Anyway, so that's something that Ronda's going to have to determine herself and where she's at. But here's the thing about Ronda, and I personally think she can come back. I don't think she's down and out. She's got 2 losses, but hey, some of the best fighters have had losses. Some of the greatest fighters of all time have had losses. Anderson Silva for the women in Megumi Fuji. She went 22-0 without a loss, 22 fights without a loss until she fought Zoila Frausto for the Bellator Championship Tournament, and she lost to Zoila, and Zoila broke her streak. But does that mean that Megumi Fuji is a total failure? No. To this day, she's arguably one of the best female fighters to ever compete in women's mixed martial arts. And so Megumi Fuji lost. She's got a bunch of losses on her record. This still doesn't take away from what she did. It doesn't take away from her skill and her talent. So the same thing with Ronda is, just because she has a couple losses doesn't mean she's not a great fighter. Doesn't mean she was a lot of hype. Because I don't believe that. I don't believe she was a lot of hype. I believe they hyped her up, but I think she still had an amazing skill and talent. And this is what makes Ronda unique, is one thing that Ronda has that I haven't seen in a lot of the female fighters is her ability to improvise and her ability to adapt during the fight. She has this innate ability to improvise during the fight. She said before she doesn't go in with a game plan. She takes the fight, whatever comes at her, she takes it and she adapts and she improvises. And not a lot of fighters do that. A lot of fighters go in, they fight their game, and they press their style upon their opponent. They fight their game. So whatever their opponent's doing to them, they stick to their game plan. Ronda never went in with a game plan. But that's what made Ronda unique, is her ability to adapt and improvise. She hasn't done that obviously lately, but if you really want to see what I'm talking about, watch her fight Kat Zingano. So in that Kat Zingano fight, when Kat came at her with a flying knee, what did Ronda do? She improvised. She adapted. And she pulled off an unorthodox armbar that I have never seen. And I think it surprised Ronda, but she went with it and she pulled it out. She literally pulled it out of nowhere and won that fight. So who does that? I mean, that's what makes Ronda unique. And that's the kind of fighter that Ronda is and can be once again. So the question is, what would it take for Ronda to come back? Can she come back? I believe she can come back. And this is what I believe it would take is, like I previously said, her training and her coaching with Edmond has hit a ceiling, in my opinion. What I think Ronda needs to do is she needs to change camps and she needs to change coaches and get different training. She needs to move on and she needs to take her training and her coaching to that next level. I think she's gone as far as she can with Glendale Fighting Club. She needs to move on to a bigger, a better gym, American Top Team, Jackson Winklejohn in New Mexico, even Team Alpha Male in Sacramento, heck, Black House MMA. She needs to train at a gym where the gym and the coaches are essentially, I don't want to say they're better coaches, but for lack of a better word, they're better coaches, I mean, for example, what great fighters have come out of Glendale Fighting Club? I don't know of any. And when you watch the UFC fights, you listen to Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg and Brian Stan and all them talk about how all the different training facilities around the United States and saying, oh, with Jackson Winklejohn, they're great, and or she's part of Team Hurricane Awesome in San Diego. She's part of this this one, and they all say that this is the greatest facility in MMA. You never hear them mention Glendale Fighting Club ever. So that right there to me is a red flag that she's at the wrong camp. She's at the wrong gym. So for her to come back, she needs to get rid of Edmond, move on to a different coach, move on to a different training facility, and get the training that she needs. Someone who's going to go in and really capitalize and strengthen where she really shines, and where she really shines is her arm bar and her ground skills. Really capitalize on that. Maybe incorporate some wrestling, some jiu-jitsu. Really elevate her and make her more well-rounded, and really develop her striking. With Jimmy Gifford, who is Miesha Tate's striking coach, imagine if Ronda worked with him. Wow, you'd see a whole different Ronda. So I think that's what would need to happen for her to come back, because I believe she can. I still believe 100% in Ronda. I don't doubt her skill. The other part of it is her mindset. Whether she wants to do that. She would have to get her mind strong, and she'd have to, definitely work on some psychological aspects of her fight game to come back. But I believe she can. It's all on her. So hopefully her mom will sit down and speak with her and talk to her, because her mom's not a fan of Edmond either. Pull her away from Glendale Fighting Club. Encourage her not to give up. So moving on, let's talk about Amanda, the current bantamweight champion. Now, what Amanda proved last night is she's the real deal. She proved what I've been saying all along, that you do not want to underestimate Amanda Nunes. If you do, that's your biggest mistake. So she proved it last night once again. She proved why she's got 10 wins by KO. She probably hits the hardest of any female in the UFC. Once Chris Cyborg is signed, she won't, but of the females that are currently signed, she probably hits the hardest of any female. I mean, she hits like a truck. The thing about Amanda Nunes, too, is she's not just a striker. I mean, she has in her back pocket a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and she's got 3 wins by submission, so she is well-rounded, and if it needs to go to the ground, she can do that just as well, too. She submitted Miesha Tate, she submitted Sarah McMahon. Up to this point, she hasn't had to. You know, if she can beat you on the feet, she's going to do that. And she is 100% confident in her ability. And she went into that fight last night with a ton of confidence, very relaxed. The pressure was on Ronda to perform, to prove everybody wrong. And what you saw last night, too, is you saw just another phase of her evolution. You know, she lost devastatingly to Kat Zingano, but then she bounced back and beat Sarah McMahon and then Valentina Shevchenko. And then she beat Miesha Tate to win the title. And so you've seen this kind of evolution of Amanda Nunes. I've been a fan of Amanda Nunes, since the days of Strikeforce, which, by the way, again, in Strikeforce, she knocked out Julia Budd in 14 seconds. You can Google it. And I think when Julia Budd hit the mat, you can count it. Amanda Nunes hit her. She hit her about 7 or 8 times in the face with hammer fists before the ref could even get across there to stop the fight. Julia Budd was out. Amanda Nunes jumped on her and just started hammer fisting her. So yeah, I mean, but 14 seconds, she knocked out Julia Budd, and Julia Budd was out. She dropped like a tree in the forest. So after that, I kind of realized, okay, that's the kind of power that Amanda Nunes is packing. But what you saw last night is you saw a champion in transition. I don't even think Amanda Nunes has reached her full potential yet. She's still building her skill set. She is still evolving and improving as a fighter. She still has a ways to go, but you're seeing an improved Amanda Nunes. And what you're seeing in Amanda Nunes at this time in her career is you're seeing her willingness to do whatever she needs to do to be the best that she needs to be the champion. You know, it goes back to a quote from Felice Harrigan, the Ultimate Fighter, and Felice said, "Champions do what contenders won't." And that's what separates a champion from a contender, is that a champion is willing to do what they need to do above a contender. Champions do what contenders won't. And that's why Amanda Nunes is the champion, is because she's willing to do what she needs to do. What has she done? She was with MMA Masters for most of her career, her MMA career. And she moved to Coconut Creek, Florida, joined American Top Team, changed camps, changed countries. And ever since she's been with American Top Team, they've been remarkable in their improvement and elevation of Amanda Nunes' skill. I mean, what they've done with her is really remarkable. I mean, you can see visibly evident her improvement as a fighter. Once she went from MMA Masters to American Top Team, you can see the fight where there was a change. And I believe in that fight, it was the Valentina Shevchenko fight. Because up to that point, what was the problem, one of the biggest problems that Amanda Nunes had is that she'd come out of that corner, as soon as that bell rings, she'd come out of that corner at about 200 miles an hour and just start swinging. And that was her fighting style. She would just swarm you and just try to hit you as many times and as fast as she could. What she would do is she'd burn through her gas, and she'd empty her gas tank at the end of the first round, and she'd be out of gas. And that's what happened in the Kat Zingano fight, and you saw that clearly, because that first round, Amanda Nunes just obliterated Kat Zingano and just pounded her with shots. But after that first round, it was all Kat Zingano. The second and third round, Kat just destroyed her after that. Which, by the way, is a testament to how durable Kat Zingano is, because she absorbed some of the hardest shots that Amanda Nunes threw at her, and she took it. Anyway, so that's the one thing American Top Team was able to change in Amanda Nunes' fighting style, was to get her cardio under control. She actually said that, I believe, at the end of the Valentina Shevchenko fight, too, is that the one thing she gets tired very easily. And she said she's working to figure out how to change that. And so and as soon as I heard her say that, I was like, yes. And that was one of the things that I realized a long time ago, is that she burns through her gas tank too soon. And I think everybody realized it except for her. But she finally realized it, and when she went to American Top Team, they were able to correct that. And what you saw in her next fight is a more reserved, Amanda Nunes, where she didn't come out of the corner 200 miles an hour. She comes out and relaxed more, and she's more technical. She's more methodical rather than just blaring out and swinging. She picks her shots, and she just takes her time and actually, worked on that. So you can see a visibly evidence of that improvement ever since she's been at American Top Team. They've been very remarkable in her progression and evolution as a fighter. What this means for the women's bantamweight division now, with Ronda's defeat, with Amanda on top. But with that, like I said before, she's going to have to continue to evolve and elevate her fight game, because what happens now is the rest of the division is going to do the same. They're going to elevate their fight game, because now what has happened is the circle has repeated, is that before it was the Ronda show, and no one could figure out the puzzle on how to beat Ronda. Well, Holly figured it out, and now Ronda's been beat twice. So now, since Amanda Nunes is on top, and she's beaten, two of the top UFC fighters in the division, 3 if you want to count, I guess, Valentina Shevchenko too, because she's right up there. So she's beaten some of the top 3. So what that's going to do is now the blueprint. Now the question is, how do you defeat Amanda Nunes? So that's what it becomes, is they're chasing that title. So all the other fighters in the division are going to elevate their game and rise to the occasion. If they don't, then they're going to get left behind. So what this also means is, seeing what Amanda did to Ronda last night, is it shows growth in the division, and it shows the evolution of the fighters in that division. At one time, Amanda Nunes was ranked, down in like 7 or 8. She slowly climbed the ranks by beating other fighters to get to the top, and now she's the champion. So it shows the evolution of what's happening in that division, and it's showing that the improvement. That you're gonna have to fight on this level if you're gonna beat Amanda Nunes. So what this means for the bantamweight division also is that you either grow or you get left behind. Case in point, Jessica Eye. And no disrespect to Jessica Eye, but she's on a 4-fight losing streak. And she was ranked, in the top 10 at one point, and now she's near the bottom. But she kind of does the same thing for every fight. It just shows other fighters leapfrogging over her. And that's what's going to happen, because it's a competition. It's not a team competition in that top 15 ranking. It's individual. Either you advance or eventually you get cut. So in conclusion, I think it's a great time for women's combat sports right now, specifically MMA. And so what also I think what's going to happen for the women's division too is, with this featherweight division opening up in February with Holly Holm and Germaine de Randamie for the title fight, is you're going to see, some of the bantamweights are going to move up to 145 and be, in the featherweight division. So it's going to open up some spots for the UFC to sign new talent to the bantamweight division. So it's going to be a kind of an influx of new talent you're going to see. So it's both divisions are going to change. The bantamweight division is going to change, and the rankings are going to change. So I think it's an exciting time for the UFC bantamweight division right now. Anyway, thanks again for listening to the Women Throwin Leather podcast. Once again, I am D. Allen.